All right, as our brother Dagon Suyum said, we are on week 3 of our series titled Love Lies. All right, so what we've been talking about the past several weeks, for those of you guys that are new, is that we're talking about lies. We're talking about misconceptions that we have when it comes to relationship, when it comes to dating, or when it comes to marriage. And what we said was, we started the first week, we said, whatever we believe, right? Your belief impacts how you live. Whatever you believe impacts how you treat people, right? And we looked at the story of Adam and Eve, right? Satan, the devil, came to Eve and told her a lie. As a result of her believing that lie, it resulted in death. It resulted in sin entering the world because of how she acted based on a lie that she believed as truth. And that is what this series is all about. It's about what are some of the lies that we've heard when it comes to being single? What are some of the lies and the misconceptions we have when it comes to dating, right? And marriage and our role as the husband and the wife when it comes to conflict. And we have all these misconceptions, and what we're doing for the past several weeks and for 5 weeks is we're talking about what does God have to say when it comes to dating, when it comes to being single in the relationship. And our theme verse for this series is titled, there you go, the clicker works. All right, we have a clicker, by the way, which has been, after 2 years, we finally have a clicker. All right, so our theme verse is, God is saying, my people, my children, right? The people of God, they're destroyed because of lack of knowledge. Like, homes are being destroyed, families that are separated, kids that grow up without a father or a mother in their lives because of a lack of knowledge, because of the lies that we believe as truth when it comes to relationship and what it means. So the first week, the lie that we talked about was how singleness, people that are single, that we equate that with a failure. We equate people being single as like you're not doing what you're supposed, especially women once they get to like late 20s and their 30s. People look at women and they said, you're a failure. Why are you not married? There's a lot of pressure. And we equate being single as something that we failed in life. And we saw how that is far from the truth because our patron saint, St. Paul, he was single. And we will never say that he was a failure. But when it comes to us being single, we equate that with being a failure. The truth is that singleness, our season of being single, is a gift that God has given us. Unfortunately, a lot of us, we don't open that gift because we're going from a relationship to a relationship starting from as early as middle school, as early as high school, and you start dating and you're never single, and you don't have the opportunity to work on yourself. You don't have an opportunity to lay your foundation on God, on Christ, but instead we're always chasing relationship. So what we said, the truth is singleness is not a failure, but it's a gift that God has given us, and it's a gift with a purpose and a season. Last week, what we talked about is dating, right? What we said is when it comes to dating, the Bible doesn't talk about dating. There's nothing in the Bible that said like, Rebecca went on a date with so-and-so, or David, he dated that girl. There's nothing that talks about dating. So dating is not biblical. But the lies that we tell ourselves is, dating is for fun. Dating is something for me to do. Dating is something for me to do on a Friday night. It's to fill in my schedule. Like, I have nothing to do, so I'm going to go out on a date with this girl. I'm going to go on a date with that boy. And we look at dating as something that we just do as fun. We look at dating as it's harmless. But the truth, when it comes to dating is, think of it as a transportation, as a vehicle that takes you from that dating phase into marriage. Dating is a path that leads to marriage. Dating is not a playground. That's for kids. That's for young kids to go around and have fun. Dating could harm people if we don't do it with intentions. And we talked about biblical wisdom when it comes to dating and what we can use. And we talked about how we, and in our dating phase, the importance of dating somebody that shared the similar faith as you, right? Not just somebody that identified themselves or labeled themselves as a Christian, but somebody that actually walks like Christ did or strives to walk like Christ did. And we talked about during our dating phase the importance of setting physical boundaries. Don't look at boundaries as something that is God is holding things back from you, but it's to protect you. And we talked about sex. When it comes to sex, we look at sex as something that we can't talk about in the church, or we can to our students, our kids when it comes to sex. Sex is not bad. Sex is great. But because God, the designer, He invented sex. He designed sex, but in the context of marriage. So it's important that when we're dating, that we set physical boundaries, that we don't practice what we're supposed to be doing in marriage while we're dating, and the importance of those boundaries. And then the last one we talked about was handling conflict. The importance of learning and dating phase of when a conflict comes, when a challenge comes, don't just quit. Don't just give up. That is an opportunity for you to work through the problems, work through the challenge. Because if we don't, we're practicing divorce as early as high school, where we are on a date with somebody, we're in a relationship with somebody, something happens, we look for the next girl, we look for the next boy. And we practice this for 15 years. And we get into marriage, and there's a conflict, there's a problem, and we've wired our brain up to quit, to run away from the problem. So it's important that we learn in our dating stage of how to work through conflict. So that was just a quick recap. If you've missed any of the weeks, you could always visit our YouTube page. So moving on today, week 3. When I think about the world, I think about there's 2 groups of people in the world. When you think about like assembling chairs, or a table, or things that we buy from IKEA or Costco, when you have to assemble furniture, there's a group of people that like to read everything. The manual, the instructions, what's cautious, making sure all the parts are there before we start assembling. That's the first group of people. But then we have the second group, usually men, including myself, that we get a box, we look at a chair, how hard can it be to assemble a chair? How hard can it be to assemble a table? You look at the picture and you try to figure things out, right? And that is what 90% of us try to do when it comes to assembling a furniture. Because we'll figure it out. Get a screw there, this fits here, so let's put it, if it doesn't fit, try another. And we just try to figure things out. I feel like that is what 90% of people do when it comes to marriage. When it comes to marriage, we try to figure things out. God, the designer, He gave us the blueprint. He gave us what marriage should be. He gave us the instruction. He gave us the manual of what marriage should be. But a lot of us, unfortunately, we try to figure it out. We try to just base it based on what we know. For example, some people's marriage and what that looks like is based on what we see in our parents. I saw how my dad treated my mom. Maybe that's my role as a husband. I saw how the way my mom talked to my dad. Maybe that is how I'm supposed to be as a wife. But is that true? Is that always right? Sometimes we let the government tell us what marriage should be, who marriage should be with. And we let the government define what marriage is. We allow social trends. We allow celebrities tell us what marriage should be. While I was getting ready for this, again, I confess I live under the rock. I don't know a lot of things. But have you guys ever heard of a starter marriage? Everybody ever heard of a starter marriage? Okay, I guess I don't live the rock. Maybe all of us live under the rock. There's a thing called a starter marriage. Now, what that is, I had to look it up and I had to do some research. A starter marriage is what it sounds like. It's a starter marriage, meaning I get married to somebody not to exceed 5 years. And it exists. And people are actually in a starter marriage. And we look at that. Is that marriage? Is that how God, the designer, is that His instruction? That we can do a starter marriage? To me, that sounds like a lease when you lease a car. That doesn't sound like marriage. Question, when it comes to marriage, think of your favorite show. Think of the last movies that you've seen. When is the last time that we've seen a movie or a show that portrayed marriage in a positive way, in a positive light? Usually a movie, I love movies. Usually movies, you have a husband that is having an affair. You have a wife that is miserable dealing with her no good husband. Movies, shows, doesn't portray marriage in a positive light. So when it comes to marriage, there is a lot of confusion. People are questioning marriage that has been around for centuries, that was designed centuries and centuries ago by God, is now being questioned. Is marriage even necessary? Do I need to be married? People ask, is marriage even a good thing? People think marriage is boring. True story. I had a coworker. He came and he was telling me he was getting ready to go visit his parents. And I said, oh, that's nice. And he said, I'm not looking forward to it. And I'm like, that's your parents. He said, I'm not excited. And I said, why are you not excited? And he said, well, my parents, they've been married for 40 plus years. And I'm like, that's beautiful. Honest truth, this is what he said next. He said, they hate each other. They've been married for 40 years, but they hate each other. He said when he goes to the house, his parents don't talk to each other. They live in separate floors. They live in separate rooms, but they refuse to get a divorce because they're Catholic. He's not Orthodox, he's Catholic. Is that marriage? Is that what a true marriage is? Let's just, get married and try to live and not to kill each other. We see that in our parents, and sometimes that is our conception of what marriage is. We have people that are single that are not questioning about marriage. Single people that want nothing to do with marriage. My wife was at a graduation about several weeks ago. And judgment-free zone, I'm not judging anybody. She was at a graduation, and the graduation was huge. It was grand. They had like 300 to 400 people in that graduation. And my wife was like, man, like they had the decoration, they had, the meat, like drinks, water, like food, like think of it like it looked like a wedding. So my wife was talking to the graduate, she's a senior graduating, and she said like your graduation is just like marriage, it's like a wedding. Like, why is it so big? And this girl, a senior in high school, she said, well, my graduation, I wanted it to be big because I probably won't get married. I don't want to get married based on what I see. Based on what I see in the world. Her view of marriage, she said, doesn't work. It's not good. I look at marriage and people are miserable in their marriage. But is that true? Is marriage the problem? Is there something wrong with marriage? Or is it the people that are married is the problem? Are we the problem, or is marriage the problem? That's why our main point for today, I don't know if the clicker works, but our main point for today is that broken marriage, do not prove God's design is flawed. Broken marriages that are miserable, do not prove God's design is flawed. What they prove is that we stopped following the designer's plan. There is nothing wrong with marriage. Marriage is not miserable. Instead, it's miserable people that got married and now they're miserable. Marriage is not miserable. Don't believe the lies. We take marriage advice from people that have never been married, and we say marriage is terrible, based on people that are single that have never been married. We listen to marriage advice from people that have been divorced and they're on their second or third marriage, and we equate marriage as to being a bad thing. Not something that I look forward to. It's miserable. It's a life sentence. It's death. Society has failed in marriage. First week we said marriage is at a 45% divorce rate. Almost half of marriage end in divorce. The problem is not marriage. The problem is people. It's us. Because we've stopped following the designer's plan. God's design for what marriage should be, what it should look like. So what is your foundation when it comes to marriage? What is your foundation? What is your understanding of what a husband is supposed to be? what a wife is supposed to be? Is it our parents? Or is it the celebrities that we follow? The shows that we watch? Or is it based on the designer, God, who has given us the blueprint for what marriage should be? Marriage is great. I've been married for almost 8 years. Marriage is beautiful because it was designed, created by God. And we say God is omniscient, meaning like he's all-knowing. He is the designer. Marriage is perfect. From the very first book in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 2, we see how God designed marriage. And God said, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Genesis 2, chapter 24, verses 25. God is the creator of marriage. God is the designer of a marriage. If we stop following it based on what he tells us, don't blame the designer. Don't blame marriage doesn't work. No, we don't work when we don't follow the instructions. Just like assembling the furniture. We can't blame IKEA or Target if we don't follow the instruction or the manual that they gave us to build whatever furniture that we have. When God created marriage, he said, man and women, husband and wife, not what the government tells us. Only he is qualified to write the instruction of what marriage should be. We have to stop trying to figure things out when it comes to marriage. Like, we have to stop trying to figure things out in life. But most importantly, when it comes to marriage, we have to stop creating our own instruction based on what we think is right, based on what we think can work. We have to stop taking shortcuts when it comes to marriage. The shortcut is what I'm talking about. We don't spend enough time in our singleness. Because of that, we get married. We take a shortcut. Now, we want to be single because we're married. A lot of people try to be single in their marriage. That's not the time. Stop taking shortcut. Every season God has given us, a season of singleness. Adam, he was single in chapter 1. It wasn't until chapter 2 that he was married, that he had Eve, he had a partner. We have to follow the designer's plan and what he's instructing us to do. So whatever misconceptions that we have, whatever lies you have, open your heart and let's see what God's design for marriage is. We're going to go through 3 lessons of what God, not me, not what I think is right, not what I saw in my parents, not what worked in my marriage, but what God thinks is how God designed marriage. So we're going to look at these 3 biblical lessons when it comes to what a marriage should be. Lesson number 1 is that honor marriage as God's holy mystery. Honor marriage as God's holy mystery, not just a milestone. Honor marriage as a sacrament, as a mystery within the church, not just a milestone for us to check off. We forget that marriage, holy matrimony, is one of the sacraments within our church. It's not a cultural life event when it comes to marriage. It's not a checklist for me to do by the time I hit a certain age. If I'm not ready for marriage, I shouldn't partake in this sacrament. Think about how much preparation that we do before we confess. How much preparation that we do before we partake in Holy Communion. Especially in our church, a lot of us, we respect Holy Communion to a point where some of us, we don't even take it out of respect. But when it comes to marriage, we walk down that aisle and we'll say, I'll get married. What's the difference? They're both sacraments. A lot of us don't honor marriage as a sacrament, but we look at it as a life event. We look at it as a cultural thing to do. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 31 through 32, St. Paul says it this way. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and church. Marriage is a great mystery. Holy matrimony is a great mystery. The husband and the wife, two people, they get married, they become one. In marriage, when you ask an addition question, 1 plus 1 equals 1 in marriage. Outside of marriage, 1 plus 1 is 2. But within marriage, 1 plus 1 equals 1. It's a mystery. How? I don't know. Think about Holy Communion. Bread and wine turns into the flesh and blood of Christ. It's a mystery. When you think about confession, I walk into a confession room full of sin. I go into the confession room. I confess my sin. I walk out with an absolution prayer, free of sin. It's a mystery. We have to realize, rewire our brain to say that marriage, holy matrimony, is a sacrament. It's not something that I could just come into the church. I'm in love. I want to get married. It's a sacrament that we're partaking. All of Christianity, if you think about it, is a mystery. The Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, 3 persons in one Godhead. How? It's a mystery. Incarnation, Son of God, becoming man. The term teohado means 2 natures united into one. His humanity, his divinity, when we say one nature. How? I don't know. It's a mystery. Holy matrimony is when 2 people become one. It's a sacrament that's conducted in the church. It's a miracle that only God can perform. It's not a miracle that a courthouse can perform. Sometimes we don't realize when it comes to holy matrimony, if you've ever been to an Orthodox church, during a wedding, during a holy matrimony, you don't have the husband that's just standing here and waiting for his bride to walk in. Instead, what you have is you have the bride and you have the groom that walk down the aisle. And who are they holding? They're holding the priest. The priest is holding them. The priest plays the role of Christ, and he walks them to the altar. Marriage starts at the altar. That is why, just like any of the sacraments is done in the church. So why do people get married at the beach? That's not how God designed it. That is not a sacrament. That is not marriage. We don't get married in a courthouse. We don't get married in a backyard. We don't get married at a nice venue for picture reasons. People, the way God designed marriage is for it to partake as a sacrament within the church, within the presence of Christ. The source for your marriage, the source for the marriage is what happens at the altar. Every Sunday, there's a sacrifice that takes place at the altar, on the altar. Same thing when it comes to our marriage, when it comes to holy matrimony. Christ offers his flesh. Christ offers his blood. And that is why a holy matrimony, marriage, is done inside the church with the blood and flesh of Christ. Because that's what unites the husband and the wife into one person. But we get surprised when people get married in a courthouse, at the beach, at different places, and they get divorced, and they get married again, they get divorced. That is not marriage. That is not how God designed marriage to be. When people get married outside of the church, I always say, good luck to you. If you don't want to get married within the church, without partaking of his flesh and his blood, think about any of the sacraments. When people get baptized, they take Holy Communion. After Holy Order, when people get ordained as a deacon, our brothers that were ordained, they've been partaking Holy Communion, which stamps their ordination. Same thing after confession. Your confession father tells you a day when you can start partaking of his flesh and blood. Same thing when it comes to holy matrimony. But we try to do it on our own. We try to have it on the beach because it's fun. We see it on TV. It's good for pictures. Marriage is a sacrament that should be taken in the presence of God. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we read, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. That third cord is Christ. You want your marriage to sustain. You want your marriage to last, to be forever. What sustains us is Christ, which happens in the presence of the church. When we partake in his flesh, when we partake in his blood, during our Holy Communion, that unites us into one person. Two people becoming one. It's a mystery. And that happens when we partake in his flesh and blood. That's our first lesson. That is how God designed marriage. Right? To be a sacrament, not a milestone, not a checklist. It's not a cultural event, but it's a sacrament within the church. Lesson number two. Enter marriage as a path to holiness, not just happiness. Enter marriage as a path to holiness, not just happiness. The goal of marriage is not to be happy. That's the byproduct. You can be happy through your marriage, but that's not the goal. The goal of marriage is holiness. The goal of marriage is to be in unity with God. Holiness is the calling. Marriage is not a calling. That's not the goal. Like St. Paul, he was never married. That's not our goal. Whether you go into the monkhood or where you live, you dedicate your life to the church. Or most of us who will be married, the goal is to become holy. You know who knew that? That marriage is something that can be holy if done right. I don't think a lot of us know that. A lot of us go into marriage for our happiness. She makes me happy. He's so great, he makes me happy. Is that what marriage is? That is our thinking. That is the lies that we tell ourselves. Marriage is something that is going to help me attain salvation, unity with God. You know who knew that? Somebody that is very smart, somebody that is very crafty. The devil knew that. Satan, he understood that because he's crafty, he's smart. If you think about when God instituted marriage, was in Genesis chapter 2. The last two verses, God instituted marriage. When did the devil show up? He wasn't there in chapter 1 during creation. He wasn't there when Adam was alone with God. Chapter 3, verse 1, Satan shows up and attacks the marriage, attacks Eve. Because he knew, he understood that marriage leads to a life of holiness. But do we understand that? Do we realize that that is what my marriage is? Like my marriage, our marriage, like people that are married, it's not to be happy and, it's not about being happiness. That is a byproduct. Marriage is great. I'm happy. But the goal is salvation. My role to my wife is to make sure that she attains salvation. Her goal in the marriage is to make sure that I attain salvation. All the sacraments, if you think about it, they're for healing. If we understand lesson number 1, that sacrament, holy matrimony is a sacrament, are any of the sacraments to make us happy? Do we partake in the flesh and blood to make us happy? Yeah, we can be happy as a result of it, but is that what the happiness is for? People that confess, is it to make you happy? Is it so that you can receive forgiveness and have eternal life? People that are baptized, do we baptize them so we can be happy? No, it's because God said no one shall enter the kingdom of heaven unless they're baptized. All the sacraments instituted by God points us towards salvation, points us towards Him. Marriage is no different. Marriage is no different, but we sometimes want to think it's for our happiness. And you know why that's dangerous? When we associate marriage, holy matrimony with happiness, because what happens if you're not happy? What happens if you're not happy? You leave. I'm not happy. I leave. That's why it's so dangerous for us to think and believe that marriage is to make me happy. Don't get married to be happy. I'll warn you. But if you want to enter marriage to help you in your spiritual life, somebody that can help you attain salvation, that's what marriage is for. That's why I say marriage is Christ's workshop for the soul. Marriage is God's way to fix our soul. It's a workshop for our soul to become more like Him. Marriage, you know what happens in marriage? Is we should be loving, right? Marriage teaches you to love, just as Christ loved. Marriage teaches you how to love your partner when they don't deserve it. We ask God, God, teach me how to be patient. How do you think you're going to learn to be patient? He's going to give you somebody that's going to test you to see how you can be patient. Marriage is about forgiveness. Marriage teaches you how to forgive, not because they deserve it, not because they helped you, not because they made you happy, but because as a Christian, that's what I'm supposed to do. Because Christ forgave me as I forgive others. Marriage teaches you how to give, how to sacrifice for your spouse, not take. Christianity is not about taking. For God so loved the world that He gave. You want to be like God. You want to be like Christ. Marriage is what tests you, that pushes you. It's the workshop that God makes you to be like Him. As of a great husband that I am, trust me, my wife has a lot to deal with. It's teaching her how to love when I don't when she's teaching her how to love me, even when I'm bad, even when I always do the right thing. When I first got married, my wife, I couldn't speak, I couldn't share my emotions, my feelings. She had to deal with a lot. But it's teaching her how to be patient. It's teaching her how to love. Marriage is not about happiness. Marriage teaches you how to become like Christ so that you can attain holiness, so that you can attain salvation. People equate marriage with happiness. It's like the complete opposite. I always say marriage, like the day of your marriage, we teach a premarital class, we always say the day of your marriage, understand, it's a funeral. It's a funeral. The day of your marriage, there is a funeral happening the same day. Because what did Christ say? There's a husband, there's a wife, there's a woman, there is a man, two people, they become one. Somebody dies. Somebody dies during a wedding. That is your will. That is your ambition. That is your goal. That is your selfish desires. Marriage is not happiness. Marriage is a funeral. Marriage is when I died and I no longer live for myself. I live for my wife. My wife, that day, on our marriage day, she died. She lives for me. What does Kaleab need? That is marriage. It's not about happiness. It's about killing your selfish desire. You have your single season to work on all that stuff. But within marriage, it's not about what you want to do. It's not about what makes you happy. It's about what can I do for my spouse. That's lesson number 2. That marriage is not about happiness. It's how can I attain holiness? How can I be Christ-like? The last one, when it comes to marriage, marriage is a covenant. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. The world treats marriage as a contract. What that means is a contract is I do something for you and you do something for me. There's an exchange. There's a mutual benefit when it comes to a contract. It's based on mutual respect or mutual agreement that I do something in return for you to do something. That is the contract. Think of it as a rent. right? Like if I rent a house or if I rent a room, right, I'm promising to pay a certain amount of money. So my benefit is that I pay money. The benefit that I get is I have somewhere to stay. The person that's renting me the house, their benefit is they get money. They get an extra income. There's a mutual agreement. There's a mutual benefit. But if I stop paying the rent, the tenant or the landlord, they can kick me out. I can leave a house. Same thing, if they kick me out, I don't pay. Sometimes my fear that the world treats marriage as a contract. They treat marriage as a contract. When there's an issue in marriage, if I'm not happy, I can walk out. That's what the starter marriage is all about, is to see if we're compatible. If I'm not happy, I have 5 years to figure it out, and then I can leave. I have a different coworker, a couple weeks ago. He came, and this is a true story. And he's been married for I don't know how many years, but he's been married for a while. He's a lot older than I am. And he was telling me about his challenges within his marriage. And he told me a lot of his problems. And every time people, tell me problems with their marriage, I always look at them and say, okay, what are you not doing? What are you not doing? And that was my question to him. And he said, well, I don't do these things because she doesn't do it for me. So I stopped doing what she wants me to do because she doesn't do what I want her to do. That is not God's design of marriage. That is not marriage. That is a contract. That is outside of marriage. We can't blame the designer when we don't understand that marriage is not a contract, it's a covenant. The idea of a contract leads to, if I'm not satisfied, if I'm not happy, I can walk out of this marriage. Marriage is not worth fighting for because we treat it as a contract. Contract says, what's in it for me? How do I win? How do I benefit? That is not God's design for holy matrimony. In the book of Malachi, chapter 2, verse 14, this is what God says. God's design. He said, the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, whom you have forsaken, yet she is your companion and the wife of your covenant. Marriage is a covenant. It's not a contract. A marriage, a covenant, is sacred. It's unbreakable. A covenant says, what can I give? What can I sacrifice for him, for her? Not what can I take. A covenant says, I will, even if you don't. There's no if when it comes to a covenant. I will if you do that. That doesn't happen within a covenant. Imagine, think about God. God is in a covenant relationship with us. Imagine if he treated us like it was a contract. Every time we sinned, that he stopped loving us. He stopped having compassion. His love, his grace is taken away because we fall short because we sinned. The promises, his blessing is taken away. Would any of us want that? We would be without hope. That is why St. Paul, when he thinks about a covenant or marriage, he compares it to the life of Christ and the church. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, we read this verse earlier, but I want to focus on the last part. He said, this, talking about marriage, after he talked about the husband's role and the wife's role, he said, this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Christ's relationship with the church is permanent. It's unbreakable. And that is what marriage is. St. Paul compares marriage to the relationship of Christ and the church, Christ and his people, because it's unbreakable. It's a lifelong covenant. Saying, I am committed to you regardless. Because it's based on me giving, based on me sacrificing. Because it reflects the relationship of Christ and what he had with the church. Because Christ said, while we were still sinners, that he died for us. I am called to love my wife, to be in a covenant relationship with her. It's a lifelong commitment. Even when she doesn't have her best days. Even when she's not the nice. I am in a committed relationship. And I've told myself, there is no ifs and buts. So we need to treat marriage as a covenant and not a contract. When it comes to a perfect marriage, people say, what is a perfect marriage? Does a perfect marriage even exist? I believe a perfect marriage is when we understand marriage as a sacrament created by God that leads me to a life of holiness, that leads me towards salvation. But it takes, for a perfect marriage to happen, it takes a husband that is imperfect. It takes a wife that is imperfect who refuse to give up on one another, who refuse to let go. Not because they're perfect, but understanding we are imperfect people that are married, that are committed to this relationship, that are committed to marriage. That is a perfect marriage. So, one recommendation. I know we have two groups of people. People that are married and people that are not married. So I'll start with the people that are planning to get married. Those of you that want to get married, I advise you, I recommend you, highly suggest that you don't get married before you take a premarital class, based on the church's view. Don't walk down the aisle based on your assumption of what marriage is, because it won't work. For those of you guys that want to get married, make it your priority. Once you're engaged, once you have your fiance, take a premarital class with the church to understand, what is my role as a husband? What is my role as the wife, according to the church teaching? Not my assumption, not what I saw in my parents, not what I saw in the celebrities or the shows. Think about it. We take training for everything that we do in life. Work. We take training. Medical school. Those that want to be doctors. You're in school for 10, 20 years before you become a doctor. How much more time should we invest in marriage that is supposed to be a covenant before we get married? Unfortunately, a lot of us, we spend so much more time on the decoration, the flowers, the eating, the whatever, the food, the tresega, like all these things. And we don't prepare for the sacrament that we're about to partake. So I recommend everybody that is planning to get married, take a premarital class. Equip yourself with the tools that you need to have a successful marriage according to the designer, God, who gave us the instruction. For those that are married, invest in your marriage. Whether you've been married 5 years or 20 years or 30 years, invest in your marriage. Just like at work, just like any field, whether you're a doctor, whether you work for a consultant, we have a continuous learning, we have a continuous training that we have to take. Marriage is no different. Marriage, what you were 20 years ago when you were married the first 2 years, is very different with children. Whether they're young and when they get older, their dynamic changes. So those of you guys that are married, invest in your marriage. Take your husband out on a date. Take your wife on a date. I don't care if you've been married 20, 30 years. Make time for your husband and your wife. So you don't end up like my coworker, married for 40 years, and you say they hate each other. Because your kids are watching. How do you treat your husband? How do you treat your wife? How do you talk to your husband? How do you talk to your wife? Because our children, they watch more than they listen. So invest in your marriage. One thing that my wife and I did several years ago, there's a thing called, excuse me, there's a thing called a weekend to remember. A weekend to remember. For those of you guys that are married, I encourage you. It's a marriage retreat. Take your husband, take your wife on a weekend. It's from Friday to Sunday. It's a Christian-based retreat. And I'm telling you, my wife, like we went with other couples, we benefited so much from it. It's called a weekend to remember. They have one in Tysons. They have one in Williamsburg. There's one coming up in Williamsburg. So those of you guys that are married, continue to invest in your marriage. Be a better husband. Be a better wife. Because we could continue to be the better person that we are, that God wants us to be. So I'll conclude with my last, this is one of my favorite quotes when it comes to what a wedding, what a marriage should look like. It's by an early Christian author, and Tertullian. And if you know me, I've posted this on Instagram. This is like, I saw this years ago. And this is what a beautiful marriage is. This is what a marriage should be. And it reads, how beautiful then the marriage of two Christians, two who are one in hope, one in desire, one in the way of life they follow, one in the religion they practice. They are as brother and sister, both servants of the same master. Nothing divides them, either in flesh or spirit. Hear the oneness. Keeps going. They are, in very truth, two in one flesh. And when there is but one flesh, there is also one spirit. They pray together. They worship together. They fast together, instructing one another, encouraging one another, strengthening one another. Side by side, they face difficulties and persecution, share their consolations. They have no secrets from one another. They never shun each other's company. They never bring sorrow to each other's heart. Psalms and hymns they sing to one another. And this is my favorite part. Hearing and seeing this, Christ rejoices. To such as these, he gives his peace. Where they are two together, there also he is present. And where he is, there evil is not. That is the marriage that I want for everybody. That is a beautiful marriage. That is a picture, an image of what a marriage should be. As we are, and I'll promise I'll conclude with this. As we are in the midst of the fast of Assumption of Our Lady, the Virgin Mary. If you guys know the story in the Gospel of John, chapter 2, there's a wedding that takes place, and Christ is present with Our Lady, the Virgin Mary. There's one thing that the Virgin Mary said, if you guys remember, in John chapter 2. When they ran out of wine, she told the servants, she said, do whatever he tells you to do. The Virgin Mary said, do whatever he tells you to do. And my prayer is that we would listen to Our Lady, the Virgin Mary, and that we would do whatever the designer has told us of what marriage should be according to him. Glory be to God.